What's up, scholars? Welcome back to another video. My name is Haley, otherwise known as the Fictional Scholar, and today we are going to be doing part 2 of A Case for Zutara. And in part 1, we covered the parallels between the two, whether it be the Painted Lady and the Blue Spirit, or the episodes that kind of got to themselves to focus on their characters like the Blue Spirit and the Painted Lady and Zuko alone. We looked at those parallels and kind of looked at the similarities, the differences, how they coincide together, and also the differences and how people reacted to them. And so today we are going to be doing part 2 of this video. This one's going to be just a little bit longer than the other one was, so buckle in, boys and girls. This is gonna be a doozy. We're going to be talking about some of the tropes that were built into the story that would have been phenomenal had the payoff been there, and tropes that I think would have been done really well in these certain contexts, like the classic enemies to lovers storytelling trope. We're also going to be talking about just their general relationship with one another, how they talk to each other, how they approach each other, things of that nature. And we're also going to be talking about their overall arc together, from their first meetings and how they collide throughout the series, getting up to season 3 whenever Zutara forgives Zuko. To end it all, we're really going to be talking about just the storytelling sense of why it would have made sense for those two to be together. At least, again, this is all my opinion, but why it would have made sense for them to be together, the payoff it would have had, and how it could have done so much good, not just in the Avatar universe, but just for what the themes of this show were talking about. So it's gonna be a ride, and I'm so excited because even though they aren't canon or anything like that, Zutara is probably still one of my favorite ships of all time. And we're really just going to take some time to kind of break down this ship and why I truly believe it would have been such a great storytelling payoff if those two would have gotten together. So make sure you like and subscribe down below. Leave a comment if you like this video. And without further ado, let's go right into the video. First topic, this storytelling trope of enemies to lovers. We're really going to look at how they started off as actual enemies, and even when they were enemies, they still had a certain amount of tension between them, whether it be in their interactions or these little gazes they would give, look at each other. A lot of people might be like, well, you're reaching there, but if you actually watch Avatar, it's not that big of a reach, if I'm being completely honest. And Zuko and Zutara have a lot of chemistry as enemies, and there's this kind of almost like a love-hate relationship between them that gets developed. Of course, Zutara already has this deep-seated hatred towards the Fire Nation because of what they have done to her mother and to her family, how they have attacked her tribe again and again over the years of war. And so she already has this huge prejudice against the Fire Nation, and of course Zuko does not make that any better when he is coming to find Aang and he attacks the village again, not necessarily to cause them any harm, but because he was trying to get Aang, and at that point he was gonna do whatever he could to get Aang. They don't really have a lot of interactions up to that point, but it gets to the point where not only are they meeting more and more throughout the first few episodes and they're learning more about each other, but I will say, Zuko is a very observant character, and he had to be observant of Zutara enough in the few episodes that he saw her when we were first introduced to them going against each other's enemies, to recognize her necklace. And it could be an easy write-up of well, she's from the Water Tribe, that's obviously a Water Tribe necklace. But for him to really pinpoint and know her necklace whenever he picks it up at the end of episode 6 in imprisonment, and he knows that it's Zutara's necklace, it just, if anything, it shows that he is paying attention to who Aang is with at that Like, that's all that is at that point. He's just paying attention. He's a very observant character. In the waterbending scroll, when Katara is trying her best to learn waterbending, and she's getting frustrated with it, so she's practicing off, sneaking off by herself, and the pirates are about to take her. She ends up fighting them off. And when she runs to Zuko and he catches her by the wrist and he says, "I'll save you from the pirates." Like, that's the type of tension I'm talking about when I'm talking about these two. It's because Zuko would have never, ever said that to anybody else. And of course you'd be like, oh, well, that's just because, you know, Katara's a girl or anything like that. He would have said that to any of them. But just that one little interaction and the scene following where she's tied to a tree and he's kind of circling around her and he holds the necklace like tauntingly in front of her neck, and she's like, "Oh, where'd you get that?" He was like, "Well, I didn't steal it, if that's what you're asking." You know, it's that type of flirtatious tension and the flirtatious banter, while also both of them still being enemies and still kind of hating each other's guts at that time. Especially Katara. I think Katara truly just was so angry at that time, especially when she learned that he had her mother's necklace. And it's just these types of interactions that he doesn't really have with anybody else, but he has with Katara. I don't know why, as many times as I've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, I've seen all these small, subtle movements and interactions that the two have, just because there's been times where I'm like, okay, I want to look to see if, like, I've made it up in my head, or I want to look to see if what I actually saw was there. So I intentionally looked for those moments, and I found them very easily. When Bato, the Water Tribe, that episode, and, you know, Zuko is tracking down Katara as a way to track down Aang, and June was like the original one, even if she was teasing. She's the one who was like, "Oh, is that your girlfriend?" And of course, you know, she's just ridiculing Zuko, but she's like, "Yeah, no wonder she left you. She's way too pretty for you." That stuff like that, but it created an extra layer of tension between the two. And when they're with June on the sheer shoe's back, there's a moment where Katara is about to fall off and Zuko grabs her and holds her steady. He doesn't do that to Sokka. I think he was just gonna let Sokka fall if he fell. But he grabs Katara to make sure that she doesn't fall. Again, it's just these small little moments, these small little interactions that don't get pointed out, that I feel like each little interaction, they kind of build up and build up throughout the series. Not just saying, oh, in book one they could have been together. Like, no, absolutely not. But season one placed some of these moments there so that when you got to season 3, you can see how they got there, and it's like, oh, that makes sense. And then, of course, in the end of season 1, the Siege of the North, where Zuko and Katara are fighting against each other again, and it's this really epic battle, and it's so cool to see, like, the two, because they are opposite elements, fire and water, and to see them go at it like that. And then of course Zuko says this iconic line where he says, "You rise with the moon, I rise with the sun." It just shows the yin and yang attributes to Katara and Zuko just so well, and that fight it always makes me laugh. But when he can see how much stronger Katara is, and he knows how much she's progressed, and he's like, "You little peasant, you got yourself a master, didn't you?" It's just like, that was his way of being like, you actually had the gall to get better than me, okay. It's that, again, there's these little tensions that come between their banter when they are enemies that you don't see Zuko having with anybody else. Like, even the banter he has with the banter he has with Sokka, which is mostly telling Sokka to shut up, which translates to their friendship later on. But also with Aang, like, his interactions with Aang are completely different as well. Like, he has very unique interactions with each member, but his interactions with Katara stands out just a little bit more. And again, throughout season 2, there's not a lot of moments with them together because of how season 2 is set up. The biggest moment for them in season 2 is in the Crossroads of Destiny, where they are both thrown in prison together in Ba Sing Se, and Katara is just not having it with Zuko at that moment. She is yelling at him, she's insulting him, and just letting him hear everything that's on her mind, which is honestly the first time we see what Katara is truly feeling, because Katara usually keeps her emotions in check for the most part. Like, yes, she'll talk about Hope. Yes, she'll talk about her mom. That's natural stuff for her to talk about. But for her to truly just vent her anger and just go off like she does on Zuko, it's kind of interesting to see that this enemy that's with her is the one she expresses herself to the most out of everybody in her group. But Zuko, on the other hand, he just sits there and takes it. He's not yelling back at her, he's not defensive, and he's just sitting there with his back turned and just listening to her. It finally gets to the point, where Katara breaks down and she starts crying. She tells him about her mom, and Zuko is able to say, "I'm sorry, that's something we have in common." And he's the one who creates that commonality between them, this common ground where they can see each other as an equal, in a sense of, we've both lost the same thing due to these similar circumstances. Of course, Zuko losing his mom wasn't as final as Katara losing her mom, because Zuko's mom was revealed to be alive at the end. But the fact that Zuko was willing to at least extend that hand and say, "I am sorry, but that is something, like, I don't have my mom either because of this war." And because of who... If Zuko was really being honest, he would have said, "Because of who my dad is, I don't have a mom either." It's this really heartfelt moment between the two, and Katara ends up apologizing to him, and she says, "Whenever I pictured the enemy's face, it was your face." And Zuko, at this point, he's so self-conscious about his sorry, and he's like, "Oh, my face, I see." And she's like, "No, that's not what I meant." And Zuko is able to open up to Katara like he does with nobody else. Like, he's not even this open with Iroh. And he's just talking through these emotions with himself and talking to her. And she's like, "Well, maybe you could be free of your scar." And Katara is actually the only person that Zuko willingly lets touch his scar. He is completely okay with it when she stands in front of him. He closes his eyes and she puts her hand on his scar. And it's interesting to see these two characters who have seen each other as enemies suddenly have a very mutual bond of trust that happened over a very short time, just being in prison together and actually expressing both sides, like expressing their emotions on both sides, and then they find this common ground, and from that buds this trust. And it happens so quickly that you're just like, wow, that was like almost too natural. Like, they just came together and they trusted each other so quickly, even after everything like Zuko's done to them. But then, of course, Zuko, my sweet, precious child, Zuko ends up betraying them after, Aang shows up and he takes Katara and he leaves, and Iroh's trying to talk to Zuko. Zuko ends up betraying Iroh, betraying Katara and Aang, and siding with Azula. Which leads into season 3. When their interactions start, when Zuko is coming to join the gang. We have seen Katara angry at people before. Like, we've seen her angry at Jet. We have seen her angry at other people, other villagers, things of that nature. But the way she is angry at Zuko whenever he comes to join Team Avatar is a much more elevated anger than we've seen from her. And some people are like, yo, why is she being so petty? Like, why won't she forgive him? Well, first of all, because she did trust him and he betrayed her, Aang died and she had to bring him back to life. So that's one reason. Another reason is that Katara really thought she could trust Zuko, and it made her feel like a fool whenever he betrayed her. Which is why whenever he is joining, the most tension, you would think that the most tension between that group would be like Aang and Zuko, because Aang is the one that he's been after for so long. He has been the main target, and he got hurt directly because of Zuko's actions and things of that sort. But no, Aang is most of all pretty okay with Zuko being there. Sokka's kind of indifferent because he's like, well, if you think this is the best way, then okay. And Toph's just like, yeah, we need a firebender. Like, Toph was like the biggest proponent to getting Zuko on the team. But Katara is the one who is most against it. And you can see, it's like that visible tension that you can almost just see through the screen. You can feel it because she's just glaring at him and he's sweating. He's sweating as he's waiting for her to say whether or not she accepts him into their group. That threat at the end of episode 12 where she's basically threatens to kill him is because she is holding all this anger inside. All the anger from when they were in prison together, this anger that's been bubbling over about what's happened to her mom, the anger of this defeat, this recent defeat from the Day of Black Sun, like all this anger and stuff keeps bubbling over and over, and Zuko is the perfect target for her to take it out on, and so she does. And we see their little banter back and forth, oh, I've lost my firebending. Well, maybe you aren't as good as you thought you are. Like, even Toph is like, ouch. But you see all this little banter back and forth until it kind of, reaches its peak in the Southern Raiders, which is one of my favorite episodes. The Southern Raiders is when, Katara's anger has just reached a boiling point, and she has nowhere to put all this anger that she has. And all this hurt and pain that she's been feeling for years and has suppressed for so long. And poor Zuko's just kind of the recipient of it at this point. And it's totally shit-baiting too, what they did when Zuko saves Katara from the falling rocks and he's holding her and she's like, what are you doing? He's like, keeping rocks from crushing you. And then she's just like, okay, I'm not crushed. Can you get off me now? But all these moments where you're like, wow, like she really must hate him, but that's not quite the case either. She is just hurt and upset and holding a grudge, which I can understand why. But she's really upset and she's just projecting it all on him without care. Which is also interesting because usually if she's feeling stuff like that, like all these heavy emotions that she feels towards people, normally kind of get toned down. But not with Zuko. Zuko always experiences like the full brunt of Katara's emotions, whether it be the joy, whether it be anger, whether it be grief. Like she shows every single side of that to him without reserve. And she doesn't do that with anybody else, especially in the Southern Raiders. One of the most interesting things at that point is, Zuko and, Zuko's fighting Azula, and then after they fight and they go off the ship, after that little explosion, Zuko's falling and he reaches his hand out and Katara is the one who reaches out to grab him and pull him back down on Appa. It isn't Aang. I mean, Aang was flying, so it would have been hard to. It wasn't Sokka, who had just gone on this huge trip with Zuko and they were like best buds. And it wasn't Toph, which I don't think she would have been able to. It wasn't Suki. It was Katara. Like, Katara, the one who has supposedly hated him the most ever since he came back, who's bickered with him the most, and who has all these emotions just unmasked in front of him. She's the one who reaches out to him. And it's like he knows she's gonna catch him. It's so interesting that despite the mixed feelings and despite the grudge and the tension between them, there's still a small level of trust that wasn't completely shattered at Ba Sing Se. Enough for that when he reaches out for her, she's the one who grabs him and pulls him down. And then, of course, they have their moments in the Southern Raiders, and he goes out of his way to really help gain Katara's trust back. And at this point, he's doing anything he can to let her know that, like, I want you to trust me. And for him to like really seek her forgiveness like that says so much about what he thinks of her. Because he says to Saga, he says, I do care what she thinks of me. Just openly says that to Sokka because he's trying to figure out the root of this. And Zuko is the only one who realizes the root of Katara's anger stems from her mom's death. He's like, oh, it's not exactly, he's like, it's not really just at me. She's just taking it out on me because she has no, like, there's nowhere else for her to put all this anger. And instead of, like, getting really upset about this anger that's being misdirected at him, he goes about to help her just be able to get this anger out and help her find the person who killed her mom so that she can find some sort of resolution and some sort of peace. And nobody else in the group has done that for Katara. And then, of course, you know, in the finale, or their banter and the Ember Island players is hilarious. I love their witty banter. It is so good. Because you can really tell, like, as soon as Katara forgives Zuko and they have that really heartfelt hug, it speaks volumes because the following episodes we get, like, the way she's treating him so much different because that anger has been released. He's been the one that helped her with that, and he's earned her trust again, and it's very apparent. And so, like, the Ember Island players is a great little episode. And then the finale, you get all these moments with Zuko and Katara where they're, you know, on the beach together. They have all these different conversations. And then when Aang goes missing, Katara's the first one to look to Zuko and be like, what do we do? Because, you know, yeah, you are the expert at tracking Aang. We don't know how you did it back then, but if you could do it now, that'd be great. You know, that kind of thing, like turning to him for help, being with him, and again, June somehow thinking that, you know, oh, you and your girlfriend got back together, how nice. Of course, their huge moment in the finale where Zuko and Katara go to face Azula. Zuko and Azula are fighting, and he ends up saving Katara from being shot by lightning, critically injuring himself. And after Katara is able to defeat Azula, she goes to him and is able to heal him, and she's crying, and she's like, I should be the one thanking you. You know, like, that moment is so perfect, and it's so sweet. I wish I could just talk about that episode in general, but we're not here for that. It's fine. Their story is so perfectly laid out of being the perfect enemies to lovers because of how they started, the tension they had when they were still enemies, to their developing moments where, oh, you think you can trust them and then that trust breaks and there's a betrayal, and then coming back and the redemption and him working to gain that trust again, to them being on equal grounds with each other, working together and sacrificing themselves for the other. Like, that's such a beautiful story. Like, that's just beautiful storytelling. Not only is that a good trope, but Zuko and Katara open up and care for each other more so than they do most others. Zuko, he has Iroh, and his care for Iroh is unlike any others. He loves Iroh from the bottom of his heart. Nobody can replace Iroh in Zuko's heart in the story. And for Katara, you know, she's always been this more of a motherly figure, so of course she cares for a whole lot of people. The most ones being Sokka, Aang, and Toph. But it's interesting to see that when these two interact and they're open and they care for each other, unlike they do anyone else, especially for Katara, like, you know, like when Iroh is shot by Azula, Katara cares enough about her enemy at this point for her to go up and say, I can help. Like, Zuko, I can help. Of course, Zuko denies it because he's in that much pain and rage at that time that he can't think clearly. But she's able to offer him help when she really had no reason to because they were enemies. And then, of course, their whole conversation in the Crossroads of Destiny, you hear bits and pieces of Katara's thoughts throughout the first few seasons, but most of it she kind of keeps to herself. And Zuko is the first one she just completely lashes out on and lets, like, just word vomits on, pretty much. Like, she tells him how she's feeling. She is ranting about how much she hates the Fire Nation and how terrible of a person they are, you know. everything like that. And Zuko is the one to listen to her. He doesn't interrupt her angry rant. He doesn't do any of that. He just sits there and listens to her. And and then he apologizes. He doesn't try to negate what she's feeling. He doesn't try to belittle what she's feeling. He's just like, I'm sorry. And then of course with the Southern Raiders, you see that Zuko is really there to find solace for Katara. He really wants her to be able to find closure in any sense that she can, because he recognizes the fact that this rage inside of Katara is unchecked and has nowhere to go, but he also recognizes, he's like, oh, well, if your mother died that young and she hasn't let all this rage out, then well, yeah, of course it's got nowhere to go because she's held it in for so long. Not that he would be speaking from experience or anything, but Zuko's the one, he waits outside of her tent for her to wake up just so he can, you know, tell her, he's like, I'm gonna help you find the man who killed your parent, or who killed your mom. He takes her on this trip, not just to, he doesn't really take her on, and I think this gets misconstrued a lot. They think Zuko takes Katara on this trip just to kill him. And it's like, that's not the purpose of why Zuko was willing to help Katara. But I think no matter what she would have done at that point, he would have stood by her. But he trusted her enough to make the right choice. And that's why he wasn't going to interfere, because it was her decision, not his. And then, of course, you know, when he saves Katara by jumping in front of the lightning, and then Katara saves him by healing his insides, pretty much. And there's also these moments of them caring about each other, like when Zuko is going to confront Iroh and he just kind of drops to his knees in front of Iroh's tent, and Katara is the one to go over there and ask him what's wrong, and she really gives him a sense of solace and comfort, and he is able to openly express to her why he's so hesitant to walk inside, and she's the one that's able to reassure him, like, you are sorry for what you did, right? And he's like, yeah, of course. She was like, then he'll forgive you. I know he will. It's they have a very mutual trust and just very open bond, this open conversation that is always there with them. They don't hide what they're feeling from each other, which can't really be said with a lot of the other characters, is that Zuko is most open when he's talking to Katara, and Katara is most open when she's talking to Zuko. And I know I kind of went into their arc with the storytelling trope, but just really to solidify it real quick, their arc in season 1, where they're meeting and they're enemies when they first meet, and then with the waterbending scroll, this tension that gets built by Zuko pretty much taunting Katara, but also having her as a captive for a moment, just to try, like, yes, Katara is not his target, he's trying to get to Aang, but it always seems to kind of be Katara is the one that he's catching. Just saying. And then their huge moment towards the end of season 1 with the Sage of the North, and just they're fighting. They're always, Zuko and Katara are always together in the season finale. Season 1 finale, they were fighting in the North Pole. Season 2 finale, they went from being in prison together to fighting each other in the catacombs. Like, they were both together. And then season 3, they are together in the finale, facing Azula, everything like that. So it's kind of neat to see that these two opposing characters are always together in the finale. It's a good bit of storytelling and adds layers and complexity to the storyline, but also to these characters as well. And then season 2, episode 8, with the whole Iroh thing, and then their main one, of course, being the Crossroads of Destiny. We have that whole thing. And then in season 3, we don't really get any interactions between them until the latter half, from 12 to 21, like episode-wise, 12 to 21 apparently, like, just full of their interactions. And it really shows their growth of coming from this place of not quite enemies, but of Katara holding a grudge against him, Zuko trying to do the right thing, this kind of back and forth that they have until the Southern Raiders, where Zuko's able to prove himself and gets her trust back. And then from then on, their banter kind of changes. It's more playful. They're teasing each other, having great conversations. And then in the finale, of course, in the finale, again, it's so interesting to see that when Iroh's like, no, you'll need help facing Azula, the first person he turns to is Katara. He's like, Katara, how would you like to help me put Azula in her place? And of course, Katara's like, it would be my pleasure. It seems like the more these two interact, the more they're together, the more they turn to one another when they need help. Like, Aang goes missing, they don't know where he is. Boom, she turns to Zuko. Zuko, what do we do? Iroh says that Zuko needs someone to help him fight Azula. Boom, Katara, will you help me? It's so crazy to see how much trust and respect they have for one another, because they see each other as equals, and that's really, really fantastic. Storytelling wise, it would have made so much sense for Zuko and Katara to be together. Not just because it was something I wanted, but because of the way their relationship and their dynamic was set up. It could have easily been endgame. I'm not saying it had to be at the end of season 3 or anything like that, but they could have definitely been endgame, and easily could have seen that. They have the whole enemies to lovers things, but the more they're together and the more they're interacting together, you can really see the healthy relationship that they have. And a lot of people have been saying like Zutara would be toxic. How? I don't see that at all. They actually have a very healthy relationship. They're very open with each other. Katara, first of all, Katara keeps Zuko in check and calls him out on all of his, like, anything that he does, she will call him out on it. And Zuko is the one who really pays attention to Katara's emotions and keeps, like, and really brings them to her attention and helps her work through them. They are both very open with each other, not just emotionally, but just practically, and, you know, trying to figure out these problems, solving things together. It almost feels, again, this is my opinion, it almost feels like Zuko is the only one to truly validate Katara's feelings. And I know Katara gets so much hate for talking about her mom, which I still do not understand, but Zuko is the only one who really truly takes it seriously and validates those feelings, that anger that she has, and doesn't try to dismiss it, doesn't try to ignore that side of her, and doesn't try to, well, you need to handle it this way, you need to go about it this way. No, he lets her figure it out, and he's there supporting in any way he can while still trying to keep her in line. But he's listening to her when she's telling him the story of what happened and when she ran away from this man who killed her mom, and when they got, like, when she got her dad and they came back, her mom was dead, which, yes, that means she saw her mom's dead body when she was just a small child. Of course she's gonna be traumatized and talk about her mom all the time. Leave Katara alone. But, you know, as Zuko's listening to the story, as they're on Appa and the Southern Raiders, you know, Zuko just says, your mother was a brave woman. Like, he validates these feelings, and he listens to her, and he talks about her mom too. And the two of them, they really have a lot of chemistry together. That chemistry really started in season 1 with the waterbending scroll, and it kind of just kept going from there. And the color schemes that they have, much like yin and yang, this blue and red, fire, water, but instead of being like opposites, they more complement each other. And the fact that they're similar but different at the same time, like a true yin and yang. There's some of the white and the black, there's some of the black and the white, you know, it mixes together to create harmony. And we see that exact, like in the first part, we talked about the blue spirit and the painted lady, and the water and fire, everything like that. Their color schemes. And her violence, this violent side of Katara, is quieted by his support and his ability to listen to her. And his anger is quieted by her acknowledgement, because she is one of the ones to acknowledge his scar and to acknowledge these feelings that he has when she's listening to him in um, in the Crossroads of Destiny. The anger he feels often gets acknowledged by Katara, and just like he doesn't ignore her feelings, she doesn't ignore his either. It's both on a very equal playing field. And again, they remind me so much of Twee and Law, the sun and the moon, circling each other in an eternal dance, this balance that both of them bring, because they are very similar, but they're still different. They have these different attributes that coincide and work so well together. This is another reason I thought they had set it up, because in The Cave of Two Lovers, the story of the Forbidden Lovers, where the man and the woman were a part of two different villages that were at war with each other, but they still found a way to each other to make their love work, and they got united. Now, of course, the Forbidden Lover story ended a little differently and a lot more depressing. But that setup of the Forbidden Lovers would have been the perfect payoff with Zuko and Katara, because she's from the Water Tribe, he's from the Fire Nation, two opposing nations at war with one another, brought together by these two being together. I think that would have been just such a cool tie-in to some of this world building that Avatar had laid out in front of us. The reason why it makes sense to me is just a few reasons here. One, they would have been such a power couple, first of all. And for these two to join together, that would mean that the Water Tribe and the Fire Nation are coming together, that they're at peace, they find peace in each other without, one taking over the other. And Avatar is all about unity. It's all about bringing people together. And what better way to do that than these two people who have fought, that know the toils of war, that have fought against it, have seen all sides of it, coming together to help make a difference and to help bring about change. They balance and support one another. And Katara is actually one of the people, not the only one, because there was a lot of people, especially in book 2, who helped Zuko realize the toils of war. But Katara is one of the ones who has made Zuko realize the effects of war and the effects of his own actions, like how his actions directly affect others and directly affect himself. And he's had to work his way back and make up for these actions that he's made. And it would have been such a great story payoff because of the way they built it up. There was so much ship baiting between those two. It was unreal, that it could have easily just been them, and it would have made just as much sense, if not more sense. Like, especially in the Ember Island players, oh my goodness. They just dangled that right in front of our face. That's fine, it's fine. But the dynamic those two have is unlike any other in the show, and I honestly believe they would have made a better couple than the ones they ended up with. I have some issues with why I don't like Aang and Katara together. A lot of it is due to the fact that Aang is kind of obsessed with Katara. He has been since he first met her, and it almost kind of felt like Katara was just like the prize to be won at the end for him, and I didn't really see a lot of the same romantic development. It kind of felt sudden to me and not earned. It never sat right with me. And a lot of people that I've seen, when people are like, oh well, Zuko and Katara would have been together or should have been together, people are like, well, what about Aang? I get that you I love Aang as a character, like, don't get me wrong, I like Aang as a character, but I've never heard somebody say, oh well, what if Zuko and Katara were together? Well, what about Katara? Nobody's ever said that. Oh, what about Aang? He would be so heartbroken. Does Katara not count? But that's besides the point. And then with Zuko and Mai, I never liked their relationship. One, it came out of nowhere in season 3, and it wasn't a very, their relationship wasn't very healthy. And I get that May had a big moment in season 3 with her standing up to Azula, and that's a fantastic moment. And I love it very much. But I also don't think one moment means that they should have been together, and especially knowing that in the comics they don't even end up together, that they break up again. So it almost feels like a cop out of pairing Zuko with May just so that he's not single or available, that, oh well, Zuko can get May and can get Katara. It felt like such a cop out to me. Their relationship never made sense. I never liked May with Zuko. However, that is my take on Zuko and Katara. Their relationship and their dynamic, I felt, was better built than any of the other relationships besides Sokka and Suki. I think they did a really good job with those two. But besides Sokka and Suki, I really think Katara and Zuko had the best relationship development, only for it to just not happen at the end. And it never made sense to me back when I was a kid, and it still doesn't make sense to me now. Their story is just really nice to see, and there's a reason Zutara shippers are still out there to this day, because there is so much there for us to grasp onto and be like, no, everything was laid out for us, everything was here, it just didn't happen for some reason. But anyways, that is my take on Zuko and Katara's relationship. I still to this day firmly believe they should have been canon, should have been endgame. And again, nothing is going to change my mind about that. No matter what anybody says or calls me or anything like that, I will still remain a Zutara shipper. If you have liked this analysis, and if you have any comments you want to add about something maybe I kind of skimmed over and you would have liked to see in more detail, or if you have thoughts on Zutara as well, leave it down in the comments. I would love to have a great conversation with you about this. And if you have differing opinions from me, that's fine as well. Just stay civil in the comments and be respectful. That would be perfect. I would love having conversations with people who have different opinions than me. But make sure you stay tuned for all my videos. I just recently posted a Hunter x Hunter video over Meruem and Komugi, so if you haven't seen that one, the link will be in the description box below or in the corner over there. So make sure you go check that out, because that is one of the most underrated ships of all time in my opinion, and I love them so much. Be on the lookout for more videos from me. If you want to stay in touch, make sure you follow all of my socials so you keep up with what I'm doing throughout the weeks. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Leave me a like if you'd want to, if you'd like to. That sounds weird. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!